Hello and welcome to our cast on video. We're going to learn the long tail cast on in this video, and it's called the long tail cast on because we start with a really long tail of yarn. And this is my really long tail here. I'm about to cast on 58 stitches, so in quite a chunky yarn on a chunky needle. So I've got a really long tail. It's about maybe 150 centimeters long. And that might be a little bit generous, but that's okay. It's better to have a tail that's a little bit too long than one that's too short. And the long tail cast on is a nice cast on to use for all sorts of things. It's a great all rounder. You can use it for hats, you can use it for jumpers, you can use it for scarves, you can use it for socks, you can use it for almost anything. It has a little bit of stretch to it, but it's not floppy and it's nice and neat. It's a great way to start all sorts of things. The first thing we're going to do is have our tail off to the left and the yarn that's attached to our ball off to the right. I'm going to make a little slingshot with my yarn over my left hand. I'm going to put the tail yarn over my thumb, and I'm going to put the yarn that's attached to my ball over my index finger, and then I'm going to grab both strands of yarn with my remaining fingers. And you can see here I've got a little slingshot. So this is the yarn attached to my tail, which is over here. And this is the yarn that's attached to the ball, which is over here. And you need to have the yarn in this position to get the long tail cast on to work. Then I'm going to pick the needle up in my right hand. And the first thing I'm going to do is make our first stitch, which is done with a little twist. So I've got my yarn like this, and I'm going to take my needle and push down on the yarn and then towards myself and then back up again. And you can see that creates a little twist in the yarn, and we've got our first stitch on the needle. I'm going to hold that stitch on the needle with my index finger of my right hand, just so it doesn't jump off the needle when we make our next stitch. To make our next stitch, I'm going to bring the needle towards myself and down, and it's going to come underneath this thumb loop. So I'm going under the thumb loop. See how there's a little loop on my thumb? I'm going to go under the thumb loop and then back up inside the thumb loop. Then I'm going to take the finger yarn and I'm going to go under the needle and over the top of the needle. Then I'm going to take that thumb loop and let it go over the top of the needle. Then I put my thumb back inside the slingshot and really gently tighten it up, but I don't tighten too tight. The stitches will still move easily on my needle. Then I'm going to repeat that again. So my needle is going to go towards me, down, underneath that thumb loop, and then back up inside that thumb loop. Then my finger yarn is going to go under the needle and over the top of the needle. Then my thumb loop is going to go over the top of the needle. Then I release my thumb and then put it back into the slingshot to gently tighten it up, but I don't tighten it too much. I'll push my stitches a little further down the needle. My fingers are still in the slingshot. If you lose position of your slingshot, what you're going to do is let your yarns naturally sit in the position that they want to sit, which will be, you'll see that your yarns will naturally sit. Just let them naturally dangle. One will be your yarn that's attached to your ball will naturally sit to the top, and the one that is your tail yarn will naturally sit to the bottom. Just let them relax. They won't flick around. They will always sit in the correct position. To get your fingers back into position, you'll pinch them together like this, put them between the two yarns, then grasp both yarns with your fingers and then open up your slingshot. It's very tempting to want to grab the yarns and then open up like this, but you won't be able to make a stitch doing that. It's very tempting to do that, but it won't work. So pinch your fingers, go between the yarns, then grasp, then open up. So let's make another stitch. The needle's coming towards me, underneath that thumb loop, and then up inside that thumb loop. The finger yarn goes underneath the needle and over the top, and then the thumb loop goes over the top of the needle. Then my thumb goes back into the slingshot to gently tighten. It's very tempting to want to tighten that stitch a lot because you feel like the tighter I make it, the neater it'll be. It might be neat, but it'll be so tight you won't be able to use it. So just be gentle when you're tightening those stitches up. If you're having trouble keeping your stitches nice and loose, you can use your index finger as a spacer. So here's my last stitch that I just made. I'm going to gently place my index finger here in front of it, then make my next stitch. And when I tighten my stitch up, it can't get any tighter than the space that my index finger is making because my index finger is pressed against the needle here. And you can see it leaves a nice space, which stops that stitch from getting too tight. If I routinely do that, it leaves a very nice even space between each stitch and stops those stitches from getting too tight. So let's go through the steps of making one of those stitches again. I've got my fingers in the correct slingshot position. My needle is going to come towards me, down, underneath that thumb loop, then back up inside that thumb loop. My finger yarn comes underneath the needle and over the top. Then my thumb loop goes over the top of the needle. Then my thumb comes back inside the slingshot to tighten the loop. And I can continue in this method, and you can see you can get a bit of a rhythm happening once you get used to forming those stitches. Just move the stitches down my needles a little bit so I've got some room to make some more stitches. I'm making a beanie with these cast on stitches and I need 58. So I'll keep going for a little while. Let's count how many stitches we've got so far. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 23. I've still got a while to go. And you'll notice that you're using that long tail yarn, it's getting taken up by these stitches that are forming on your needle. So that long tail is getting used up as we make our stitches. And you'll notice I keep pushing my stitches down my needle. I don't want to accidentally make stitches up here on the narrow point of the needle because they'll be really small and they won't be the same size as the stitches that are already on my needle. So I keep pushing my stitches down so that I can make my cast on stitches on the widest part of the needle so that they're all uniform and the same size as each other. Let's give our stitches a count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 45, 57. One more. I'm 58. So now I have got a little bit of tail left. I did overestimate a little bit, but that's better than underestimating and running out of tail yarn. So here we go. I've got enough stitches for my hat. So how did you go with your cast on? Rewatch the video if you need to. It doesn't matter if you have to give it a few tries before you get it right, but you just want your stitches to be able to move reasonably freely on your needle. If you have to really push them on your needle to get them to move, they're probably too tight. If you've got big loops hanging down here or they're all different sizes, maybe try again. All right, thanks for watching.